Hello, beautiful. Today I am joined by Stephanie Mara Fox. Stephanie Mara is the world's leading somatic nutrition expert and creator of Somatic Eating and host of Satiated podcast. She has a master's degree in somatic psychotherapy, certified eating psychology coach, polyvagal informed practitioner, and certified yoga teacher. And she will be starting the somatic psychology PhD program this fall, which again, congratulations. That is so exciting. I've already been able to ask her some questions since she is also the teacher at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. And I just loved the approach and mindset she had towards the questions that I was asking. So I'm so excited to have her here today. So without further ado, welcome Stephanie Merritt to Your Body is Not the Problem podcast.
Well, thank you so much for your congratulations and just really excited to be here and to connect with you again.
Yeah, me too. Very excited. To start, can you tell us a bit more, please, about you and your body image journey?
Yeah. I often like to reflect on how much of the my journey started in my early 20s. That was when the most awareness got cultivated that my body was asking for extra attention. And it was doing so through severe digestive issues. So I was in a lot of digestive pain in my early 20s, and it kind of became this cycle where I would get a lot of pain, a lot of bloating, and that would affect how I experienced my body, how I perceived my body. And so, then there would be all of these food experimentations I would do to try to heal my gut, but also, I wanted the bloating to go away because my belly would get so big that it would affect my sense of self-confidence in my early 20s. Now, throughout that journey, I always thought that if I just got to a place of if I heal the digestive issues and I can just like get rid of the bloating and the pain, then I'll feel good about being inside of my body. That wasn't the case, as for so many. And what I really discovered was that actually my relationship with my body and feeling safe to inhabit it started much, much earlier before I was in my 20s. And so, really what I discovered along the journey, and as you stated, getting my master's degree in somatic psychotherapy, was that there was actually a lot of trauma that my body was holding on to. And just for a moment, because trauma has become such a buzzword these days, when we talk about trauma, I always like to define that it's not about the event, it is how your body processed the event. And it is anything that happened that was too much, too fast, or too little for too long. And there was no co-regulation in place for you to know that you could get through that experience. So a lot of individuals have had those kind of situations occur for them. And even if something sounds like that, it might not even have been processed as traumatic if there were a lot of people around you that were able to support your body in feeling safe through that experience. So there's a lot of factors of why something gets processed as traumatic. I did have trauma that my body was holding on to. And at some point, your body's really going to start to yell, scream, speak very loudly in many different ways if you are not listening to it. And I wasn't listening to my body. My first diet was at 13 years old. So, for a long time, I was seeing my diet and my body as something to control through a diet. It was something that was not my friend. It was my enemy and it was not my ally. So, I was not learning how to listen to my body, how to listen to what it needs, how to flow with, the shifting and ever changing nature of what our body needs from day to day. And, dieting gave, I always like to normalize that diets give us actually quite a lot. If we don't have a lot of safety and structure and boundaries in our home life growing up, diets kind of give you that. They give you something that you're looking for. So if you notice yourself feeling drawn towards a diet again and again and again, and you're like, why do I keep going back on this diet? I know it doesn't work. It's emotionally and in your nervous system giving you something else. So what I kind of had to learn along the way was it was never really about healing the digestion, which, a lot did heal there. It was never really about my body image or looking a certain way. It was how these things were helping give me a sense of control and safety. And once I actually started tapping into the trauma response and healing that in my body in a very somatic way, that then a lot of other things got to heal. Being in my body felt much easier, regardless of the shifting and changing nature of, how your body appearance changes. How I could listen to even I still to this day have a sensitive digestive tract. I think I will always have a sensitive digestive tract. It runs in my family. And so this is something that has been also a little bit like passed down to me. So even on days that I have a little bit more sensitive digestion, I know that that's not the enemy anymore. That's my body's way of talking to me. So that's a quite of a extended response to your question, but I could say a lot more about just, I see more now, especially if we, are focusing more on body image today, for example, because I work with individuals a lot around binge eating and emotional eating and unexplained digestive issues, especially when you've explored all the other options about what could be going on and body image. And that if we take more of that, our worries about our body image are actually information from our body. It's how our body has learned how to communicate with us, and it knows you're going to pay attention. I mean, when you think about how many times when you have heard, like, oh my gosh, I have to lose weight. I have to lose weight right now. Have you listened to that? Have you responded to it? Have you started changing so many things in your life? Your body learns over time, how am I going to get your attention? And so when you have all these body image concerns and you're paying attention to them right away, your body's like, "Oh, well, I can get your attention through making you worry about how we look today." So, a lot more I could say there, but that's a little bit of a beginning.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It is so fascinating and so relatable, especially at least for myself. I love the way you explain trauma because younger Leah wouldn't have like I didn't think I had anything traumatizing in my life and I didn't accept it until like 2020, 2021 when I was like, "Oh shit." Like I went through a lot of stuff. Okay. And that was the point because I had also so many digestive issues that started like right as I was graduating high school. I gained a lot of weight. I was misdiagnosed for a whole bunch of things. And then eventually I had tried everything. And then I was like, wait a second. I also lost all of the weight that I had gained and I was still unhappy, still didn't like my body, and I was still so unhealthy. And that's when I started diving into like nervous system and healing from trauma. And I was like, it's so fascinating because I feel like while things like trauma are becoming more popular on social media, I still feel like people want to choose the diets. And it makes sense then when you put it as like, oh, it's a protection mechanism, it's serving them in some way. So it makes sense that they still want to choose that. But I want to just dive into everything that you shared so far. But my first question for you is what is somatic eating and how is it different from like intuitive eating or eating intuitively?
Yeah, great question. So, a little bit for those who are listening to this, I trademarked my work, Somatic Eating, and it's basically the culmination of, almost over a decade of experience of, my past experiences, but also working with thousands of individuals over the last decade and just seeing, this piece around. I worked with a lot of individuals coming from intuitive eating. And there are a lot of pieces about intuitive eating that are fantastic. I never like to, kind of downplay any approach to eating or your food because whatever works for you, great. That's what's most important is that you discover a relationship with food that feels peaceful and regulating and safety producing and supports you with embodiment. And if it was intuitive eating for you, fantastic. But what I found with a lot of individuals that I worked with is that intuitive eating, even though it's called intuitive, it is still a mental approach to eating. So, for example, some of the tenets of intuitive eating are like challenge the food police. Okay, that's you challenging the food police in your head. that's not getting you in touch with what's happening in your body. Or, for example, another tenet of intuitive eating is like listen to your hunger and fullness cues. Now, if we take that you are someone who is navigating past trauma, maybe you're living more in the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response in your body. Now, when you are in that part of your nervous system, your digestion actually shuts down. All of your resources, your blood, it moves away from the digestive tract towards your limbs to fight or flee. So when you are here, it is incredibly difficult to hear or interpret hunger or fullness cues. Your body's like, we don't need to eat right now. We're running away from a tiger. Like, why would I send you signals to eat food in this current state? So here you are, you're trying intuitive eating, and it says, okay, trust and listen to your hunger and your fullness cues. And you're like, what's that? So you eat and you eat and you eat and you eat, and you're like, I still don't feel full because you're not getting those cues at all until you get to the point of feeling so overly full. And then it's confusing, it's frustrating. I don't know why I can't do this. You think you have a willpower problem or you're weak. And all these stories get created when really what's happening is one, it's never been your fault. Your nervous system, we're talking about the autonomic nervous system. It turns on for you when something is perceived as threatening. And if you are in a place where everything is being perceived as threatening, then your digestion is never really turned on. That's where I was. Everything was being perceived as threatening, so everything felt hard to digest. So that's where a little bit of somatic eating started to come forth, and really coming to terms with the fact that there are a lot of steps that need to occur before you try something like intuitive eating. So it is more of an embodied, sensation focused approach to eating. That first we have to get to know your nervous system. We have to heal some of the trauma that's happening inside of your body. And you have to learn how to create more nervous system flexibility and communicate with the many parts of you that have different kinds of relationship with food to then be able to be in your body to intuit what your body needs, how much of it needs, what's going to be best for you. So that's a little bit of a piece of the kind of the difference there. So I always see my creation of somatic eating as the baby step before intuitive eating so that you can start to feel more comfortable feeling how you feel, navigating what's happening inside of your body. So then you might be able to practice more some of the intuitive eating practices.
Very interesting. Going back to what you said about how you were just super stressed, and so everything you were eating was causing digestive issues. I semi experienced a similar thing, which led me to be afraid of eating.
Mhm.
Like I was nervous at every meal. So how would you kind of combat, not combat, you probably want to be friends with those thoughts, but how would you go about those thoughts when you just assume you're going to be in pain after you eat, but you also know like you need to eat?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, it's exactly what you were pointing to. We have to acknowledge the fear. Right now, you might be every time you engage with food, there might be a fight or flight response that's turning on. Now, that's not a reason to not eat because your body still needs consistent nourishment regardless of what nervous system state that you're in. And just even kind of slowing down before a meal to acknowledge, I am scared. Like, this is really anxiety provoking to be about to be in relationship with food right now. I'm scared of how this is going to digest. I'm nervous about what's going to happen afterwards. So as soon as we bring language to emotion, it actually shifts us into a different part of our brain. So whereas when you start interacting with food, you might move into your amygdala, so the part of your brain that, responds with fear and you're scared. And when we bring language to emotion, we shift into our prefrontal cortex where we do more rational, logical reasoning. Like, it's okay to feel fear right now. That is totally fine that that's present. The analogy that I often like to give is naming our emotions is kind of like sitting down to a cup of tea with a friend and you're kind of sharing all the things that you're going through and you're really stressed about something and, maybe something's not going your way and your friend's just listening and they're nodding their head and they're validating your experience. That does sound hard. I'm so sorry you're going through that. And you walk away from that tea date, not necessarily having anything changed or nothing has been like fixed, but you feel so much better about what you're going through because you were seen, you were heard, and you were held in your experience by someone who was just an empathetic, present listener. So that's what we want to start doing for ourselves with our emotions. We're just saying, yeah, it's okay. I feel this way. It's totally fine. This emotion is present. How does this feel inside of my body? Because as soon as we give space to that, it's kind of like there's an emotional digestion that starts to happen. And if we kind of make this connection with digestion, you don't tell your digestive tract to turn on. You don't like put food in and you're like, okay, digestive tract, like here's what you need to do. We're going to turn on peristalsis and you need to like move the food through. No, you put the food in and your stomach just goes to work to do what it needs to do, to take what it needs from that food and release what it doesn't need. Same thing with there's nothing you need to do when you acknowledge your emotions. Your body is going to go to work to digest that experience, and it might give you an impulse. It might tell you that it needs to move your body or do something in some particular way. But as soon as you name it, you're giving space to it, to see it, to let it move through you. And, if we see emotions more like a wave, it will have like a peak and then it will crest and it will move on its way.
I love that analogy. And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of us were taught to give our power to other people. Like we're taught that we need, even though we won't ask for help, we're taught that we need help from others. We need their approval. We need their support in things. And so I think a lot of us are raised that we don't know how to hold our own emotions and to be there for ourselves in that caring way. Do you have any tips for starting that process of like feeling safe to like share your emotions with yourself?
Yeah, yeah. So it's an interesting question just because something that you're pointing out is oftentimes we so believe we have to do everything on our own. When we have an issue in our life, we're like, oh, okay, I have to tackle this all by myself before I even share it with anyone else. And I need to figure this out all on my own and then have it tied up in a neat little bow. And then I'll share it with like my best friend of like, here's the experience I just went through, but I'm good. I'm good now. So just to kind of come into that question of sometimes we need to first practice being in relationship with someone else in our emotions to get that feedback. What we're talking about is co-regulation. So someone else's body and nervous system is communicating with our body and our nervous system saying, hey, I'm hearing what you're saying. I am receiving how you're feeling, and I'm sending the message back to you that it's safe to feel how you feel. It's okay what you're going through right now, and you're not alone in this experience. Now, sometimes we can do that for ourselves, but when you're first starting to practice, it can be really hard to do that, especially if emotions have never felt safe to feel. And this is where, just to kind of bring this back around, that this is where our food behaviors, like binge eating, like emotional eating, this is where our body image concerns come in because it is trying to protect us from feeling, from being inside of our body, because that maybe felt way too intense at a point in your life when you were super young. And no one was there to maybe help you navigate that experience. Like if you start getting curious about how your parents, your family, your friends responded to you when you were having an emotional experience and you felt like no one can show up for me in this, you created this really wise strategy to be able to get through that on your own. And you did it with food and you did it with a perceived sense of control over your body's appearance. So we
Mm.
get to start to see that these things are not actually the problem. They were the answer to something else. So that's why, when we start to take a baby step towards feeling, sometimes we want to do it in relationship with someone else and be really particular about who you choose. Choose the friend, the person that typically always makes you feel safe, like gives you a lot of space to be who you are as a human being. Like you don't necessarily feel very judged by them very often, or they just, are very curious about your experience. That person in your life that you really feel like that person can show up for me and hold space for me. And then ask. You get to specifically ask, hey, I'm practicing feeling how I feel. This is new for me. So, in this experience right now, I'm going to share my emotion, and I don't want you to offer me any suggestions or advice or guidance. You are allowed to ask for what you need. And so, once someone knows, oh, I don't have to give you any advice right now, that takes the pressure off of them, where maybe some of their patterns start to step in there where they think that's what they're supposed to do. You're like, no, I don't want you to do that right now. You don't have to give me advice. That's not the kind of thing I'm looking for. And then you receive exactly what it is that you want from that person if they're able to kind of offer that to you in that moment.
That is a tool that I only just learned recently, and it's so good and so helpful that I'd be like, "Wait, Graham," my husband is like, "Do you want me to advise?" Because I would go straight into problem solving, and he'll go straight into problem solving. I'm like, "Let me just rant," or he'll be like, "Let me just rant, like, you don't need to solve any issues." I'm like, "Okay." It's so different, but it's helpful to know that going into a conversation, so I love that advice. One of the questions that I thought of when I first found out that we were doing this interview was how can someone reduce their stress when stress is like their nervous system's favorite state because it's just so comfortable because they've been in it for so long. So trying to reduce their stress would feel really uncomfortable. What kind of advice would you give for someone in that state?
Yeah. So, first off, get curious about how you're perceiving stress. Like, stress is just an experience that you're having inside of your body. And there's some interesting research that shows that stress isn't actually the problem. It is how we are perceiving or interacting with stress that usually compounds it. So, for
Mhm.
example, if you get stressed and then you're like, oh no, I shouldn't be stressed. I have to fix this stress. It's actually the panic over the stress that is dysregulating you even more. And when I talk about dysregulation, what I mean there is it is kind of further pushing you into a fight, flight, freeze, or flop state. So when we're talking about, interacting with stress differently, first we want to befriend stress. Get curious about why is stress showing up right now? Because if stress is just information from your body and you're stressed about your body's appearance, you're stressed about what you're going to eat that day. Again, it's not about the food or the body's appearance necessarily in that moment. It's like, why is this the thing that I'm stressing about? So we want to come into deeper connection with the body. And this is just the way the body is trying to talk to you. And you might start just describing, how do I feel? And you might use less emotional words and more sensation words, because sometimes when we describe things as an emotion, we have a lot of stories around what it means to feel that emotion. So, for example, if you were constantly told as a kid, you're not allowed to feel sad, like someone told you to stop crying, no one was going to show up for you if you felt sad. So, you learned, I'm not allowed to feel the experience of sadness. So, if you label something as sad, all of those stories come up because there's been an association that's been created in your body. Oh, we feel sad. Okay, you're not supposed to feel this, then let's go do something else. Let's go eat a bunch of food. Let's go look up a bunch of diets. Suddenly you're a half an hour into Google searching and you're like, wait a second, how did this happen? Like that was you trying to protect yourself from feeling the sadness.
Mm.
So if we kind of tune in and, sadness isn't necessarily here inside of my body right now, but if I start to reflect on what sadness feels like in my body, usually there is a sinking sensation that shows up in my system. If I'm feeling sad, there might be some pressure behind my eyelids, like that feeling like I'm about to cry. I know sadness could also feel like a kind of an emptiness or a hollowness in my stomach, or like a gnawing in my chest area. So my heart might feel a little heavy. So you saw all that is just sensational words. Now I have something that I can work with. Oh, okay. So I feel heavy in my chest. Hmm. Okay, could I be with that experience of heaviness in my chest for a second? So now we've moved away from the label of stress or sadness, and we're coming into contact with the body and how the body feels right now. So then I can get curious about like, okay, is there any kind of impulse here? Does this need anything? Like, does it want me to curl in or does it want me to stretch out? So now I'm in relationship with this sensation so that we get to change it from perceiving it as threatening, like this is a dangerous thing for me to feel, and rather just it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to feel heaviness in my chest. But I can be with this. I can navigate this. I can flow with this. And then you can also choose how long you stay with that. We think there's a lot out there that's like, okay, you just need to feel how you feel and you need to be with it. And I feel like there's a lot of interpretation around that, that means that you have to be with it for like 30 minutes, an hour. You have to spend a ton of time with this sensation or this feeling. But when you're first starting to practice this, you might only be able to have the capacity to maybe be with it for like 1 second. A lot of the times I suggest like set an alarm on your phone for like 5 seconds. It goes by fast. Like, okay, I'm going to spend 5 seconds with this sensation and then I'm going to move on to something else. So we want to very slowly, just coming back to your question of stress, very slowly create a relationship with stress so that you're not viewing it as threatening. So your body doesn't have to turn on like that part of your nervous system that's like, we're in danger here. It's like, oh, I'm stressed. Stress is just like if we see stress even as an ally, certain systems are turning on to be able to navigate maybe a heavier, like external load that you are, having to process or work on, like whatever it is. If you have a project that you're working on, or, you are meeting a bunch of new people, like a little bit of stress is coming online to actually help you mobilize to get through that experience. So you can also just be in dialogue with the stress around, does the stress need anything? If we just see that any kind of emotion sensation that's coming up, there's maybe a need that our body is trying to express, that we can start to get to know what it's trying to communicate and then meet that need. And now it's not with the intention of trying to get rid of how you're feeling. I think there's this expectation, oh, well, if I just name my emotion and I'm just with it, it's going to go away. But think of it more as the volume gets turned down so that you feel like you can continue on with your day, that it doesn't exponentially grow inside of your body. Now you're feeling tons of pressure, where then that's when your food and body image coping mechanisms come in to help you navigate the pressure and the intensity. Where if we just be with it at first, it's like, oh, okay, if I just be with this is just a sensation. That's all this is. And it's really uncomfortable to actually be with this sensation. The pressure doesn't have to grow inside of you, where you may feel over time practicing this that you don't need your food or body coping mechanisms as much anymore, because there's nothing that you need to turn the pressure down because you're already doing it yourself.
Yeah, I definitely feared stress for a long time. I think part of it is because I blame stress as to why I then struggled with my health for so many years. But then when I think of it, and if I think of stress as a message from my body, it's like, oh, the constant stress that every single day I was stressed was trying to tell me that my nervous system needed some love and that I needed to release the self-chosen stressors that I was taking on every single day of like stepping on the scale and hating my body. And it's like I was adding more stress into my life than was necessary. But I think again, like there's the different sides of stress is gonna make you super sick, and then there's the stress is nothing, no problem. And it's like, well, where can we again be aware of how it feels in our body, vocalize like how it feels in our body, and just listen to what it's trying to tell us. I think that is a very powerful thing to learn. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
One question I had, what would be a nervous system approach and understanding to bloating?
Mm. Yeah. So, first, bloating can bring up so much emotionally, like just in experiencing that pressure in your body and how you react to that pressure. And so, there's some cool research that I did early on. I had a published thesis when I graduated graduate school on how to cultivate a relationship with the gut brain. It's on my website for anyone who wants to read that. And so, when it comes to bloating, for example, there was a woman, her name was Gerda Boyesen, and she created something called biodynamic massage. And she would listen to people's guts with a stethoscope and kind of connect certain stomach gurgles with certain emotional releases. And
Interesting.
so, yeah. And so if we see that like there is a lot that our digestive tract can hold on for us, I once interviewed on my podcast an herbalist that was talking about how we all kind of have a weak point in our body. And usually, when we experience something intense in our system like that, it'll all go to our weak point. So, for someone who maybe experiences a lot of digestive issues like I do, you know, it could be that the weak point, I don't even like to call it the weak point. Let's call it the hypersensitive point in your body. That like it's all gonna go to my digestive tract. So bloating is a way that my body is saying like, I am having a really hard time digesting this experience right now. And it doesn't always have to do with the food. I've seen this even in my own experience over and over again that so often it's blamed on the food. And I did that for a long time as well. But when you start to notice, wait a second, I could eat the same exact food in a relaxation response or the same exact food in a stress response and it digests entirely differently. You start to experience that it's not really about the food. What I like to teach is it's about the state that you're eating the food in. And yes, you don't always have control over what state you're eating the food in because sometimes that just turns on and you can support your body the best you possibly can to move into more of that rest and digest state before you start eating. And sometimes it's just going to happen that you're going to eat food in a dysregulated state and you get to show up for your body the best that you can afterwards. But with bloating, if we see it also as your body's just having a really hard time digesting whatever it's taking in. That could be food, that could be a conversation, that could be an environment. There's so many things when you think about all the senses that you're taking in all the time that you might have like a sensory overload at some point. And bloating is like, wow, I'm holding on to a lot for you. And some of the practices that I started to do would be I would rub my belly when it was bloated. I would massage it. I would ask it what it would need. Sometimes I would lie face first down on the floor, which for a lot of individuals who experience bloating, sometimes that can feel very intense to put like more pressure on it because you're breathing into the ground. But to feel that, hey, there's this ground beneath me that I can show my belly like the world's got you. Like you are okay here and something to kind of push against to say, hey, let's just take as deep of a belly breath as we can and push against the floor beneath me because sometimes when you experience such intense like the distension in your belly that your breath can get really shallow because you're trying to decrease the amount of sensation there. But what you actually want to do is you want to take deeper breaths and increase the sensation there because your body is having a hard time taking in whatever it's taking in. And that the more that we breathe, that actually supports you in shifting into a different nervous system state where whatever it's trying to digest can start to have more resources, the blood can start moving back to your digestive tract, and the bloating starts to come down over time. So even like what we were talking about of stress and wanting to like move away from it or create a boundary with it, it actually is the more that we lean in to whatever it is that's happening inside of our body, the more we move through it instead of trying to work around it or run away from it or, whatever it is your strategy is. And again, sometimes we have to do that. I always like to normalize that whatever your first response is, that has been habitualized in your body for decades of your life. So if your pattern has been, I notice a feeling in my body, I'm going to go reach for food. That has been done over and over and over again. That to create a new pattern in your body is going to take some time. And so that means that sometimes the pattern that you know that feels comfortable and safe because you know it, that's going to keep playing out as you start practicing something new. But if again, we can just see bloating as like, what is my body trying to tell me and trying to tell me even of the state that I'm living in right now, then it's like, oh, body, thanks for letting me know. You're having a really hard time right now. And so you can, again, support your belly the best you can. Usually on days like that, I often suggest that to get really clear on what supports your body and feeling safe. So that might not be a day to wear your tightest clothes. That's a day to give your body lots and lots of space to wear flowy clothes, to wear textures that feel comfortable to you, to get really curious about what are all the senses, the sights, the sounds, the smells that continue to give cues of safety to your body because your body's already giving you a message that it is going through a really hard time.
I love that because I think whenever I chat with women about bloating, it's often causing so much more stress because they're thinking about, "Oh, I can't wear the smallest clothing that I have in my closet, and what does that mean about me and my body?" And that they're then associating it with, "Oh, I look bigger, and if I look bigger, that means this about me and my body." And so I've just noticed that for many of us, because of diet culture, because of just the influences around us, we go straight for the food and we think, "Oh, it's this food, I gotta cut it out." But like you're saying, you can eat the same thing in parasympathetic versus sympathetic, and you're gonna digest them completely differently. You may not bloat. But then again, it's how can you befriend the bloating? Because it's not a problem. Your body is not the problem. It's a message from your body. And I think it's just a cool thing when you can realize that your body has always been on your team. It's just all of these things are is it trying to send you a message. We just don't necessarily know how to listen to it yet.
Yeah. And one piece that I will just add into that is that, I can already hear some individuals being like, no, I really do have a digestive problem. And like, I really do have a microbiome imbalance. And there actually is like SIBO or something going on. And there's a reason why I'm getting bloated. Absolutely. Like, go and work with your naturopath, your functional medicine doctor, your doctors, whatever. And, look into whatever it is that you're experiencing in your body. And that even if you are having some of these issues happen in your body, we can only really heal in a relaxation response. So it's both. You could be doing all of the protocols, which I've totally experienced myself, and not really get the healing that you think you're supposed to get by following all of these digestive healing protocols because you're doing them still in a hypervigilant state where your body still doesn't know that it's safe to be here. And now that's based off of your past trauma. So it's both. You can do the protocols, but also find someone that you can work on. Like, why did this start to begin with? Because there's a reason your microbiome imbalance occurred. And that usually is a response to if we stay in a trauma response for an extended period of time, yeah, things do start getting off. So it's not just one path that usually the healing needs to occur. Obviously, I'm very passionate about, doing the nervous system regulation work and working with individuals in more of this somatic way in my work in somatic eating. But there's also this piece that I never want to diminish someone's experience is real. Your digestive issues are happening. The struggles that you're having in response to living in a dysregulated state for as long as you have, that's the way that your body accommodated that, where it was like, okay, we need to increase cortisol. We need to do this. We need to do that. And yeah, things did start to kind of go awry inside of your body. So it will be both that maybe you might need some extra support, finding homeostasis and equilibrium through some practitioners, and then also working on why this started to begin with.
I love it so much. But I want to reiterate that you shared that we need to be in a state of healing to heal. Like we need to be in the parasympathetic nervous system. I didn't know that until I got to the point where I was like, I've done everything. What the heck? And I feel like I could have done so many things differently in my journey if I had known that. So I think it's important to reiterate it here because I was taking so many things from my functional medicine doctor and just literally taking them was stressing me out. And so it's like it was the double whammy of like I'm stressed because I want to heal, I'm stressed because I feel broken, I'm stressed because I'm taking this scary thing that I'm like, wait, what's it gonna do to my body? And I'm scared to be in my body. But knowing that putting yourself into parasympathetic nervous system, and like I did so much research on like the vagus nerve, that it's so interesting how your body will, it's on your team, like it's going to help you heal, and it can partner with your doctor and whoever you're working with to do all of the things. But then also, like you're saying, it's like you can put the band-aid on, but don't forget to look at the root. Like don't forget, like, why did you cut yourself in the first place?
Yeah.
um One thing that I like to say in terms of nervous system is that when we make our body feel safe, our body becomes a safe place for us. What are some of your favorite ways to make your body feel safe?
Mm, yeah. So, as you can tell, I like to kind of bring in this experience of there is so much guidance that we get on social media, for example, and all of these things that are kind of these blanket statements, like just do this and this will work. And it's so more nuanced than that oftentimes. So I just want to bring in that first we have to identify the like intensity of what you're feeling in your body. So for example, meditation is great. But if you are, let's say, in a fight or flight response, and your body's like, we have to flee, we have to get out of here. And then you tell your body, let's sit and just breathe and do nothing. And your body's like, why are you sitting here in front of this tiger? Like, this is about to eat us. Why would you just sit here? And then you judge yourself for being like, why can't I do meditation? I feel so agitated when I sit down, because that might not be the resource that aligns with you, with what you're trying to flow with in your body, the state that you're in that moment. So we first have to identify where are you at, to then choose something that's in alignment that meets the nervous system state and the intensity of the emotions. So usually one of my favorite suggestions, if you feel like your emotions are a tidal wave, are to do things like shake or dance. It has to match the intensity of what is showing up. Like, what it feels so big that you are about to get, like, bowled over by a tidal wave, that we have to get into our body and move and shake and dance and, listen to music, which can also feel so healing as well, that matches the intensity. So choosing specific music that gets you in your body and gets you moving. So that is going to start to, when we think of shaking, for example, what it does is, I always kind of like to provide the example of my dog, who I love. As many individuals know, I speak about him a lot on social media. But, he is a corgi mix, and he is scared of almost every dog out there. But
Oh,
what it looks like is like he gets his whole hackles up on his back when he's about to pass another dog. And he looks like he might be angry or something. I know he's so scared. And so it's like, okay, sometimes you have to, attend to something else. I might be like, let's go look at this flower. Let's go like sniff this grass over here. So sometimes we have to like shift our attention to a cue of safety before we kind of go into the experience. And then, he kind of will look back and I'll be like, okay, that dog's gone. And what does he do? He shakes. So shaking is something that we've lost the kind of natural ability and awareness to do when a threat has passed. So what shaking does is it sends the message to your nervous system, the threat has passed. You can move out of sympathetic nervous system now. We're not in danger anymore. And so even if you feel like the urge to binge eat, that is already like my dog that's like, we are in danger, and is like staring at the danger. So what you can do and practice, and it can sometimes feel hard to do it in the moment, so this is a practice, is you can shake, you can put on music, you can dance, you can get in your body, because what you will be doing is you're sending the message from your body is the threat has passed. So that's one of the more like bigger actions that someone can do. Other things can be also, if you feel like it's manageable, but it still feels a little bit heightened in your body, like we were talking about before, like reaching out to a friend, having a conversation, journaling, connecting with nature. So getting some co-regulation in place, and it doesn't always have to be with a person. It can be with an animal, it can be with trees, it can be just getting outside so that you are getting just the opportunity from something else to tell your body you are safe here. And so again, like sometimes thinking of those things in the moment where you feel that heightened is really difficult to do. So, even if you're listening to this, start to create a list for yourself of your different options because you will forget in the moment. This isn't a matter of just like, why didn't I choose the thing that I know I could have chosen? Your prefrontal cortex, for you to do that rational, logical thinking, it's shut down. It's not there. So you are not going to remember what your choices are. So it's also the practice of remembering that you have a choice and giving yourself guidance of remembering what those choices are when you are in a stress response or a big emotion so that you can start to kind of flow with it in new and different ways.
I love that, and don't be afraid to borrow someone else's pet. The other day, I went to Graham's friend's house and hung out with his dog. So,
Good.
don't be
Yeah.
afraid to go find someone else's dog if you have to, but thank you so much for everything you shared. I personally find it fascinating. I know those listening will find it fascinating and just so helpful. And to close out, I have 2 quick questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is, what do you wish you could go back and tell younger Stephanie Mera?
Mm. I have a lot of conversations with my inner child, and for those who maybe come and follow my work, you'll see a lot of that as well. And if I could just tell her that everything that she's feeling is valid and normal. I think that I am a super feeler. I feel things very deeply. And because of my past trauma, I guess you could call it the gift of it, is that I pick up a lot in my environment. So I am just picking up on micro movements and subtle things that are happening in my environment all the time. And I think that when I was younger, that felt like there was something wrong with me, that I was feeling things so deeply that, you know, I love a good cry. I cry a lot. And like, what is it that I could like cry at a commercial because it moved me in some way? And so, I think if I could just tell her like her feelings make sense and it's okay for her to feel things as deeply as she does, I might have not gone down the path that I did, but again, I'm glad that I did because it brought me here to this work today. But it might have been a very different experience to have a different relationship with food in my body just much earlier on in my life, that actually it was always my best friend and it was my teammate and it wasn't ever the enemy. So, yeah, I would just tell her like it's okay to feel and it's okay to feel as deeply as you feel.
Amazing, I love that. The second one is, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out to try and love their body more?
Yeah. So, this is going to sound interesting.
I'm
Is
ready.
is to first get in touch and make space for the part of you that doesn't. So often we're
Ooh.
trying to make it better. We're trying to make our relationship and our experience of our body better. I'm supposed to move towards body love. I'm supposed to accept my body. But sometimes we first have to be with the part of us that doesn't love our body, that wants a different body, and start to hear them out, start to get curious about their beliefs. Where did they learn that they had to have a different body to get what in the world? So we have to see that not loving your body or not feeling comfortable to be in your body is also there for a reason. So before you move towards any kind of body neutrality or body respect or body love or whatever it is you're working towards, first be with the part of you that's like, but I don't love my body right now. And let that be okay. You don't have to love your body right now. You don't have to push yourself towards that if you're not ready, because that is also invalidating your experience, just like I was telling my little younger self. We want to validate your experience that where you're at right now is it's really hard to be in your body. It's hard to love certain body parts. And you might start to get really clear of when you say like things like, I hate my body or I don't love my body, is what is it about your body that you don't like? So sometimes we say it's the whole body, but you might be like, you know what? I really like my eyebrows. Like my eyebrows are great. And actually, what I really don't like is I really don't like my upper arms, or I really don't like my belly, or I really don't like my thighs. And I'm going to the parts that often for most individuals they struggle with. And so, like getting really clear that it actually isn't your whole body that you don't like. You may never have a thought about your toenails. Might be like, yeah, I feel really neutral about my toenails. Like those are totally fine, so that you can also get clear that it's not the whole body that you don't like. They're just certain parts and pieces because of maybe beliefs you created about what those parts and pieces of you are emotionally holding on for you, about how you are getting a sense of perceived safety by feeling like you can control these parts of you. So just bring in a lot of curiosity at first about where you're currently at before you try to move on to something else.
So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And for those listening, how can they get in contact with you, start working with you?
Yeah. So first you can go to my website, stephaniemara.com, or I have a second website that is somaticeating.com where you can learn more information about my 11-week program. And I'm very active on social media. So you can find all the links to my social media spaces on my website, but you can find me on Instagram at _Stephanie Mara. And I'm also on TikTok and LinkedIn. You can basically on Facebook, and you can find me at Stephanie Mara or Stephanie Mara Fox on most of those platforms. And yeah, like you mentioned, I have a podcast as well. So if you want to dive more into this somatic eating world, you can find that at Satiated, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then on my website, you can also sign up for my newsletter. So I do send out regular newsletters from week to week. I try not to send out too much, so I do not bombard your inbox. But you will also, when you sign up for that, get a really great experience that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback around about how supportive it is of kind of a 5-day email sequence of how to be with your urge to emotionally eat in more of a somatic way. So that's something that you can receive totally for free on my website. And yeah, please reach out. If you listen to this, find me on Instagram. Feel free to DM me. Let me know if you enjoyed this or what insights you got from this. And, any questions that you have, you can also email me at support@stephaniemara.com anytime.
Amazing. Thank you. I will also link all of that in the show notes below. So if you're interested, you can just scroll down and the links will be clickable for you. But again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Be sure to go follow her. Share her content is so good and you do share a lot. And I'm just like, more, 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 please. It's so good. But yes, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Loved connecting with you, and thanks for this conversation.
Of course. Thank you. And just remember that your body is not the problem.